Okay, well, this is it. It's been a long time coming. First of all, I want to thank you guys for so generously pulling me out here and putting not only myself but my partner in Lepidoptera, Gary Pearson, up. It's about the only way that we probably would have gotten out here to begin with. And in addition to that, we kind of piggybacked a grant from OSU through the Rice Lepidoptera Fund to do additional work with butterflies and moths this entire previous week. We'll carry on for a couple more days as well. So it's funny because in the brochure there, the itinerary, it says Dr. Dana Ross, and that's happened twice now. I have a master's degree in science, in entomology. It's easy enough to get a hold of me through John or David, or some of you have my email address already, but for those of you who don't and might want to contact me, I'm entirely open to helping identify things. Doesn't just have to be Oregon, anything in the Northwest, so if you can't get your regular people, feel free to come to me. I'll do what I can. I'm not always around, but I'll get back to you. So, the connection to OSU is both through the academic world, getting a couple degrees, and through a connection with the Oregon State Arthropod Collection, which is the OSU insect collection, where I'm one of several people who are curatorial associates. Basically, we're volunteers, but in my case, I use the collection to identify material as much as I help Christopher Marshall, the collection manager, with tasks that he needs. Dr. David Madison is currently the director, and he holds the Rice Professorship, which is an endowed position, an endowment through Harold Rice, who is a longtime notable Oregon collector. Was around until several years ago, from Springfield, Oregon. I guess I got the name of that one. Okay, Dave. There we go. So, what I wanted to do, especially for those of you who aren't overly familiar with butterflies, or maybe are fairly new to it, is just quickly show you some titles, which you've probably already seen through the group, but nonetheless, they're ones that I recommend for butterflies of the Pacific Northwest. You're familiar with David and David's book. I may have titles slightly wrong, these are from memory. Butterflies of Cascadia by Bob Pyle, of which another rendition of some sort is coming out before too long, hopefully. And then, of course, John Pelham's Catalog of Butterflies in the United States and Canada. That's a little bit more of just an enormous checklist with all the associated annotated information. And then a couple of websites that are helpful. Butterflies of America is really a good one, and they tend to be very, very up to date. All the big wigs in North America are kind of contributing to that. And then there's a site which I believe Paul Ottler started some years ago, the Butterflies of North America, the Mona website, also is useful. These are what some of those look like. I didn't mention the Butterflies of Oregon, which is old enough, not necessarily updated entirely, but an older book out of print. And the Atlas of Oregon Butterflies, like your Atlas of Washington Butterflies, which should probably be updated. And then, of course, you're familiar with the North American Butterfly Association. There's also the Lepidoptera Society, also encompassing anyone with an interest in butterflies and moths. And then there are many states that have their own organizations as well. If you happen to have an interest in some other part of the country, you could probably find a group that covers it. My friend Linda Kaplan, who David James and Gary Pearson know very well, down in Applegate, Oregon, down in the southwest part of the state, has a website that she keeps going. It's more of an interaction and a place to put your pictures and your adventures and have things identified, and kind of just a friendly site to put Northwest photos and such. And then I've grown very fond of the Flickr photography website that a lot of people contribute to. Rick, do you have a site? Okay. I know that some of the avid butterfly photographers will put their work on there. And one gentleman who's superb is Rob Santry, who I've gotten to know last couple of years out of Grants Pass, Oregon. Of course, a lot of what we have in Oregon, you also have in Washington. So if you want to see some outstanding photography, in addition to changing mentally, you might check it out. Now, I'm happy to be as interactive as anybody would like to be, so if you want to ask a question or make a quick comment, an arm and a "Hey Dana" probably is good, because I tend to get my little place here. So feel free to interrupt me. And then, of course, the moths are the other side of Lepidoptera, and I'm not going to devote a lot of time to them today, because you are more butterfly-oriented, and most of the discoveries that we're making in Wallowa County with moths are ongoing, and we haven't gotten specimens back to identify yet, so there's not a lot to say. But I can guarantee that a number of species that Gary and I picked up over the past week, particularly on Mount Howard, where probably a light trap has never been, are going to be significant range extensions and possible state records, certainly county records. So it's all exciting stuff for me. Moths of Western North America, Lepidoptera, Pacific Northwest Publications, I'll have a photo of that in a second. Jeff Miller and Paul Hammond, both from Corvallis and nearby Paloma, put out a series over the years. I saw copies of something here. Moths of Western North America is a big book, lots of plates, lots of information. Can't possibly cover all the moths of Western North America, but it's a good try by two of the greats, Jerry Powell and Paul Ockler. And then there's a website which is amazing, thought to be perhaps the best of its kind anywhere, possibly outdoing the Brits from what some have said. Sorry to be but that's a site worth looking at, if nothing else. It has most of the moths of the Pacific Northwest, fantastic photographs, keys that anybody can use logically, and if you find yourself wondering what something is on the porch under the light, you can probably figure it out. And then, of course, the Moth Photographers Group, of which John Davis, John, where are you? There you are, has contributed a lot to, and I'm sure others that I'm not aware of, but that's also a real good site for getting familiar with moths. So here's a couple of the publications I mentioned, and a few more. Okay, so this has been an ongoing presentation that I've been sort of weaving over time, and then frantically the last 24 hours or so. So I hope it's fun. The idea is to make it enjoyable and be both educational and entertaining. And since I'm getting to the point where I've got too much information, and the greater task is almost to whittle it down into a manageable number of things to talk about. My fear is that I never go long enough, and I always go too long. So I'll do my best to be brief per slide. Not my photo. I actually hijacked this one. It was just too outstanding, and I didn't see a photographer on it, but it's just an amazing photo of Wallowa Lake. So it's funny, in thinking about this rather circuitous path that I've taken, starting in Southern California to Oregon, having Wallowa as a kind of a dream destination for many years, and then finally getting here a couple of times, and really most interestingly, and really being able to sink my teeth in this week, again thanks to you folks. It kind of seems like the voyage of the Beagle, or in my case as an OSU beaver, or the long and winding road, or as Gary likes to say, you can't get there from here. Or just as somebody who has no idea what this part of the world is about, the Wallowas, where the heck is that? I am from Malibu, and the idea of 5 summer stories came from an old surfing movie, so I thought I'd at least have to give credit to that. I actually worked on that pier in my younger years as a sport fishing guy, so it was a lot of fun. So Act 1. This is actually my set, but we can pretend it's me. The making of a leopard doctor. I'm told by my uncle that when I was about 1, I would often be found crawling around the sidewalk following the ants' trails and seeing where they led. So maybe I could have been an ant guy as well. But my first butterfly at the age of 4, as John mentioned, was the morning cloak, and this was in West Los Angeles. And there was an oozing elm tree, and there was lots of morning cloaks back in the day. And as a little kid, I saw one on there that opened its wings a couple of times, and I went over, and there was 3 or 4 of them, and I managed to get my fingers on one, and that was it. That was the hook. I took it, put it in the sinker. This was actually collected by my son in 2013, so trying to keep the tradition alive. He's willing, but not overly eager. And there he is at that time. A few butterflies should be familiar there. So, in the beginning, you get the bug, you get a net, in which case mine was my mother's little homemade cheesecloth and wire hanger, sort of a setup. And you start going around the house, the yards, and so you branch out to the nearest vacant lot where we see butterflies. And for me, the species that were first familiar were things like fiery skippers in the upper right, going counterclockwise, the buckeye, the painted lady, mile-lidded crescent, kind of a lot of the weedy species. And then in the city parks, you'd sometimes get some of the more grandiose butterflies like western tiger swallowtails and monarchs visiting flower beds, along with the more typical ones we see everywhere. And then at some point I met a friend who was connected to Palm Springs in the desert, and that was just a whole new universe and incredibly fascinating. Just things that I'd only dreamed of. Probably one of my favorite butterflies to this day is the lower left California dogface, which is just quite something. And then before long, I figured out that you could find caterpillars, especially the Anis swallowtail caterpillars that were common in the area. So I'd go looking for those, and sometimes you get a swallowtail, and sometimes you get the flies or the wasps, but it was always fun. And then over time, over the next couple of decades, I managed to travel further. So kind of in the college years, earlier on, got around the country and the world a little bit, really favoring the tropical sites. If you've not been to the tropics, you don't know what you're missing. If you've been there, you know how amazing it is. And of course, the poor man's tropics, if you hit it right, would be southern Texas and southeast Arizona, which are quite good. Okay, so at 21, I moved to Oregon, and that was about a year after Ernst Dornfeld came out with his classic book, The Butterflies of Oregon. So that immediately was the one that I latched onto, read every word 10 times over. And in particular, what was interesting was, I thought, where he labeled classic collecting localities within the different biomes around the region, around the state, from the northwest Oregon, Willamette Valley and Coast Range to the Cascades, and he kind of just spelled it all out where you could find your different butterflies, species, and subspecies. And so I began sort of pecking away at those sites and seeing if I could find the butterflies that he wrote about so beautifully. So, okay, so I'm here in Corvallis. Willamette Valley is here, Portland's up here. And so the nearest place was Mary's Peak. That was one of the first spots I went. And I basically got to all these areas, even Steams Mountain, which my uncle, who was an OSU graduate, had raved about. And but it was always the Wallowas that was the toughest one to get to, because it just seemed like such a long drive, and you go here and you gotta go around, and I just never had probably enough money at the time to go spend the gas to get out there. So it was always this sort of a dream that was kind of one of the last places in the state on my list to get to. So when I went back to school, having failed miserably straight out of high school, I wasn't ready for the task. Jeff Miller, well, first I got a bachelor's, finished that up at OSU, and then I started working with Jeff here on the left. Jeff on the left. And he was the only guy in the department who was working with Lepidoptera at the time, and that had to be my guy. And working with him was Paul Hammond on the right, who is just an impressive person with incredible knowledge and gives it freely and is just an amazing mentor. Both these guys have really helped me along on my path. But what I quickly learned was that Lepidoptera meant more than just butterflies. It meant the moths too. So the first project that I saw happening in the lab was this Blue Mountain study, where they had just hundreds of traps full of moths coming in, and Paul would be carrying ice cream containers full of moths from various sites, and I just thought that was pretty neat. And Jeff put me to work tallying the numbers of everything that he had identified in these samples, which kind of got me going on these little, fairly nondescript things that I always thought there was just no way you could ever name them or identify them. So lo and behold, after a couple rounds of studies and some research, I got out of the university with a degree and started getting busy creating contacts and sort of making suggestions to people about what they might want to know about their Forest Service district or their, preserve, and kind of work myself into the world of state, federal, and private, agencies and so on, as somebody who can help them out identifying their butterflies and moths. Upper right, you should recognize Gary Pearson, a constant companion of mine. Appreciate his help. On the left is Linda Catherine, who's been very involved in the monarch work in Southern Oregon, and always been willing to join me wherever I am in the region when I come down to do work there. So it's been great to have these two as a part of what I do. And I won't go into details on what's what here, but there's a moth trap. It's a black light bucket trap run off a battery, and that's what we do most of our sampling for moths with. It's nice because you can set it out in the afternoon or evening, go to sleep, get a good night's sleep, come back in the morning, and lo and behold, magic. Moths in the bucket. Again, there's Paul Hammond on the right, and our new member of the fold in Corvallis, John Shepard, on the left, formerly of Nelson, BC. I'm sure you guys know John. He gets around, he's been at it a long time, and he just does a great job. Still as enthusiastic and capable as ever. And then I'm mentioning a few people here that I had photos that I could pull and just sort of touch on, but of course there have been dozens who have, just been wonderful to get to know. And you're an extension of that now as I come before you and get to know some of you at least. But Harold Rice was really quite the icon in Oregon lepidopterology, butterfly guy. Had more than one butterfly named after him. Rice is blue, Regis and Ricei. His wife, Leona, is the woman who Leona's Little Blue is named after. Anyway, they did a tremendous amount of work, made all kinds of discoveries, and he's a heck of a guy to talk to. All right, the two on the right, the guy on the left is a pretty interesting character. That's Rob Furneaux out of Mount Shasta, Northern California. And he's been working on a long-term data set in the Marble Mountains, which spans, about 35 years, I believe. Backpacking into the wilderness and collecting plant, butterfly, and possibly bird data. And apparently has something that can show some pretty good evidence of climate change, which is his life's work that he's trying to finish. And then there's Rick Aarons, sitting in the back. You've been around this year. He just came back from Florissant at the Lepidoptera Society meeting, so he's been moving fast trying to get as much of the stuff in as he can. He and I went up to a meadow in Benton County, Oregon, where Taylor's checker spot was flying. And we have very few sites in Oregon, only 2 populations that we're aware of. So that was a rare opportunity to get into that otherwise sort of off-limits area for some photographs. This couple, some of you may know, this is June and Floyd Preston. And I was going to initially read a little blurb from Bob Pyle's book, Mariposa Road, but that'd probably take too long. At any rate, these 2 out of Lawrence, Kansas have been at it. Well, Floyd pretty much all his life. He knew John Adams Comstock back in the day in Los Angeles. And his wife June was an astronomer, and they married. She joined the butterfly world and probably became more knowledgeable and adept at much of it than he. At any rate, they're wonderful people, traveled around the country, targeting specific species and subspecies for the Allen Museum, become the McGuire Center in Florida. And just a tremendous amount of work towards our understanding of North American butterflies. And then there's John Wayne, who's, the reason I put him in there, because I had the photo, but apparently the story goes that at the Siskiyou Field Institute, where I teach in Southwest Oregon, the ranch there belonged to a friend of Wayne's, and he would often come out there to escape and hang out in the off season when he wasn't making movies. And I've slept in a John Wayne room. So I'll just let you sort of, if you can see this okay, there's just a number of butterflies, some of our rare Northwest species or subspecies. In the Willamette Valley, we have Fender's blue butterfly, which is a little bit like your Blackmore's blue, just a subspecies that's sort of localized to the prairie and the lupin in the area. There's some coastal species here like the seaside hoary elfin and the coastal greenish blue. Others like Johnson's hair streak, which is becoming less common throughout the region, and so on. And one of the ways that I've gotten involved with at least a little bit is the monarchs with tagging at refuges and sort of reporting back to David James. And then I'm not going to read them all, but I've had fun inventorying butterflies at moths at various sites, including Crater Lake, Oregon Caves National Monument. Some of these just really pristine, beautiful areas, and Gary's been part of that. And it's just been a lot of fun to be able to have a project come together where, you know, management and the funding and me are all on the same page, and you can go out there and, you know, do things like we do, running around and tallying and actually scraping a living from it. So I'm going to give you just some real quick little summaries on a few of the butterflies that I've worked with over the last decade or two. One is Taylor's checker spot, which you have as well in western Washington. It's one I've been monitoring in Oregon since 2003. I think Andy Warren discovered the first of 2 populations in 1999. It was thought to be extinct from the local area. Andy discovered a population. The next year I went looking and found another one. So we know of 2 now in Benton County and Oregon. The host plant for the larvae is the English plantain on the left. Introduced, this is certainly in Oregon all they feed on. In Washington they can feed on paintbrush and some other species, but that's the one that we have to allow to remain a weed in checker spot territories. And then a critical nectar source is strawberry. And this just shows you the years from 2004 until 2015, kind of how, given my my sort of, you know, estimated abundance, you can never count them all, but my index of abundance sort of indicates this sort of rise and fall over time in those checker spot populations, or at least in that one at a place called Bazell Memorial Forest. So it's relatively stable, but you know, always in danger of having too bad a year and bottlenecking to the point of no return. There's really no other population surrounding it to come in and interject more genetic material, so it's fragile. It's definitely on the edge. That was just a shot I had to share with you, having come across that a while back. This is just nature in action, you know. Oh, it's a rare butterfly. Well, it is, but that spider's a rare butterfly right now, so. But it's neat what you see out there. The slower you go and the more you look, you'll see a lot of these finer details, or else you'll see beyond just the butterflies you're looking at and see some of the other things going on out there. Another butterfly is Fender's blue. That's the Watervowel's blue in the Willamette Valley. It's associated with the remnant prairie and the native prairie lupins. Gary and I and a cast of others have been monitoring the sites throughout Oregon for a number of years now, and there seems to be a general trend towards recovery. There's been a fair bit of management, a fair bit of money put into it, and it seems to be working. It's a butterfly that seems to, as long as it has its host plant and some sort of nectar source, does pretty well. The females require the native host plants, the nectar sources. They don't seem to like the weedy things, but the males will use anything. This, of course, is a male. And here's the lupin that the caterpillar uses. Another butterfly over on the coast that really, for this subspecies, Meridema, stronghold is sort of in the Crescent City, northern coastal California area. But we've got a little population in Oregon, just north of there in the Pistol River, and then there's a quite small population up south of Newport, Oregon, near Waldport. This is one I've been involved with a few times, and I've looked for new populations through almost the entire central and southern coastline of Oregon and haven't found any additional ones. And if you time it right, you should be able to see it, because it's very much associated with its host plant, which is Kanakanaker bearberry. And it looks like this. This is pretty classic seaside hoary elfin habitat. And this, of course, is closely related to the elfin that you have in the Puget Sound, which I don't believe we have a name for yet. David? David or David?
What is it?
The Polios in the Sound, is that named yet?
A subspecies, not really.
Another coastal species, the coastal greenish blue, also in that sort of salt spray ocean area, feeding on clover. And unfortunately, Scotch broom and shore pines have largely taken over a lot of its former habitat. But where you find it, you know, like many of these things, they're locally common to abundant, but range-wide very rare. And that's an individual that was a voucher from the population that I discovered last year on the Siuslaw National Forest near Florence, Oregon, which is the farthest northern one that we know of today. And then I thought I'd mention Leona's Little Blue, given that David James has done extensive work with it. I got in kind of early doing some general surveys and trying to figure out their distribution and range within the area and searching for new populations. Gary and I went down towards Mount Shasta, where there's a fair bit of similar looking habitat and the host plant, but didn't find a thing. So as far as anyone knows, this is confined to a portion of Klamath County, Oregon. That's it, full species. And it is associated with habitats like this, especially where you have more sandy openings throughout. Its host plant is a little spindly pink eriogonum that most people wouldn't even recognize as such. It's a remarkable little butterfly. And, just worth mentioning. And Gary and I also did a bit of a bio-blitz around within the habitat of Leona's Little Blue one year, trying to just sort of, get a sense of what the community is like, the insects associated with Leona and with the plants that it uses as nectar source and so forth. So we really had a fun time documenting butterflies, moths, and basically anything else associated with the habitat. Fantastic. Couldn't get them all the species, but we really got quite at least a morpho-species list going where we couldn't name things. But it was really fun to concentrate on a relatively small area and get a better sense of what's going on. He's very hard at work with a moth sample. Every morning, every evening you put them out, every morning you run back and pick them up. And you either have very little or sometimes a whole lot more than you want to deal with. But, you know, so this is how we do it. The light traps go out and then the work begins.
So are those dead?
Yeah.
So
They
they
are
die when they
indeed.
go in there?
Right, yeah. We put a fumigant in there so that when they enter, they're killed. It's really the only way that you can effectively sample scientifically.
So you feed them chili and you keep them in a small room?
And coffee. Oh, Gary. As much as he's willing. And then another butterfly, the silver bordered fritillary, which again is one of the sensitive species that, in this case, the Prineville, Oregon district wanted to know a little bit more about. So we went out, Gary and I went out and assessed the Big Summit Prairie area and sort of relocated some populations, found some new subpopulations within the area, and just kind of got a sense of numbers. And this was last year. And overall, it seems like they're hanging in there okay. It was a fairly dry year, so the flight period was early and short. But, you know, depending on the site you went to, they were fairly abundant. Oh, and then one more location that was quite fun was Crater Lake National Park, as I mentioned. And just a tremendous place to work with some really odd plants. One of the great little sightings was the great gray owl, which I've only seen a couple times in my life, not being a birder. It was just really a lot of fun. We had to stay in the old naturalist rangers cabin up top by the visitor center and have, you know, the Park Service kind of help us with logistics and sometimes join us. And of course, you have to have a look at that, which is the whole reason for going up like most folks. And this was sort of going to lead into a series of slides, but I decided to cut it short as much for time as anything else. But occasionally when you're wandering out there in the late afternoon in the desert, you find things on the road that are kind of interesting. This time it was a snake, and it wasn't any snake, but about a 5-foot-long whip snake. And it was, his head was up off, you know, like this on the road, looking at you almost eye level, it seemed like. And so I go, oh, I gotta see if I can get that. So we stopped, turned around, and I went over and I could see it was pointing towards the sagebrush, and I didn't want to let it get away. So I got down in there and it kind of did some wild stuff, and then it ended up turning around and coming right at me. And I got it. So Gary took a picture, and it was just really neat to see that sort of an animal up close. And so checked him out and let him go. But butterfly nets are good for more than butterflies. And now I've kind of combined this past week into the last of the 5 acts, if you will. It's really been a revealing experience. I think I tend to run around so fast from place to place, and granted that happened here as well. But you know, just seeing new territory and I think from my perspective, having a second set of eyes to show me things that, you know, I might have missed it's just been, you know, really a lot of fun. So again, I thank you guys for coaxing us out here, and then for, you know, the additional support from Oregon State. So day 1, of course, was the long drive from Corvallis. Many of you probably came from Western Washington and had a similar day. We made as far as Minot State Rec area. I don't know, it was maybe an hour north of here, something like that. And if you've not been there or want a future campsite, nice little campsites right on the Minot, was it the Minot, Wallowa River there. $10 a night. They have water, they don't have electricity, but it's just a beautiful little place and very conveniently located just off the main highway. Did put one moth trap out, and I just thought I'd show you a few of the things that we picked up. When you're mothing on this sort of a trip, really the best you can do if you don't have access to a freezer, which we don't carry with us, is to field pin things. So for each trap, you will dump the bucket out, and then you'll look at the assortment and kind of, get everybody bunched up and see what you got. And then take one or more of each species, which can be anywhere from a few to as many as 100 per bucket. And field pin those, I'll stick a label in, and I put them in Schmidt boxes, and then all this is compiled over the course of the trip until we get back to Oregon State University, and then in the insect collection is where we'll identify these things and then mount them and label them, and then they go into the enormous insect collection at OSU. And then we went on to, came through town, went down towards the Naha, and then up the other side, which I'd always called that area ultimately Summit Ridge as you get towards Hat Point, which is kind of a Snake River overview. But Gary was correct that that whole ridge going up to Granny Springs is Grizzly Ridge. And I was pleasantly surprised at the number of flowers and butterflies. There was a lot going on there. I had a little personal abdominal issue at the time, but Gary was free to swing his net with pleasure without my competition, so he had a good old time up there. Got quite a few things. As you go by, you pass this ancient little post office, and opposite it there's a wonderful general store that looks the 112 years old that it is. Worth stopping in if you go by. And then just up as you cross the Naha and continue up towards Hat Point, within about a mile or so, you'll enter a little canyon. And there's water in the creek, and there's a fair number of trees, and otherwise very dry and hot open landscape this time of year. And that little area was really good for bugs. Right off the bat, first thing Gary caught was an Oregon swallowtail.
Yep.
And it was just, just a great time from that point on. The number of species, which I think I have a list for coming up. So take a peek at that. Oregon swallowtail was quite common coming up and down the canyon. There were two-tailed swallowtails and some western tigers, various whites and sulfurs, a few hair streaks in the area, a blue, and did we get those, Gary? I might have stuck this in probably. We got creek spangle. Yeah, I guess we can pick up this stuff. It all kind of tends to run together in a blur after day, but anyway, it wasn't bad for this time of year, low down in hot country. Find the water and you'll find the butterflies. And then up top where we camped, this was a free BLM site. Wonderful view. I mean, you're right at the edge of one of the fingers that goes down from the backside of the Naha down in the Snake River. And you can see where that big gorge is. It was a smoky day, fires somewhere to the south maybe. But tremendous place to camp, free, clean, restroom, whole deal. And every evening you put the moth traps out. We found various habitats. We put one in this sort of a recovering clear cut that had a lot of nice herbaceous habitat in addition to the conifers. Put one out in sort of just a solid Ariognon field in the open, which was just really neat looking. And then I think we probably put a couple of others out. One in the forest, understory, and some other site. At any rate, that's the way that you collect the widest number of species. They're all plugged into their host plants with caterpillars. And so the more that you can put your moth traps in diverse locations, the more species you're going to be able to sample. And then in the morning, there we go, sit and pin, have your coffee. My whole way of life. So the list from Grizzly Ridge on the left, we added Mountain Parnassian, Western White, Euphalotes on the whatever the yellow Ariagnum is, David, I don't know if it's on bottom or something similar.
At that elevation, it's probably on the line.
Okay, okay. Probably the Melissa Blue still there, not the Northern. And a number of frillaries. Gary was happy to get his West Coast and painted ladies. And then the sort of high elevation Western branded sketches were there. So pretty good list. Stuff was flying. And some day flying lost to boot. Lord Prince Admiral, ubiquitous. Had to throw in a couple of butterflies here. And then we moved on to the lower in Naha. You get back down to the town of Naha, and then you have a choice of going upstream to where it's lusher and more of a conifer forest once you get up there a ways, or downstream to where there are specialties like the Yuma skipper, which is very localized around Fence Creek on that drainage. And whatever else you could find. It's also classic Oregon swallowtail country, which we did encounter. But you're looking at a lot of this. It's hot, dry, steep canyons with a little ribbon of green by the water down below. And where there is water, there is life. And we found it both aquatic in the form of trout and smallmouth bass and even turkeys coming off the far side. Gary and I sat at dusk our last night there and watched at least 30 turkeys snake their way down from the rocks on the other side. We sat silently over about 30, 40 minutes. And at first I thought they were sage grouse. And they ended up being turkeys, but they were coming down, and once in a while they'd lose their footing and one kind of slide a little bit. And then one of the adults would sort of cautiously make its way, and then a little bunch of the younger ones would come with them, and some of them made it to the water, and then ultimately they were heading for their roost site, which happened to be right on top of where Gary's tent was. So we had these big trees, and then the turkeys sneak over and they stay quiet, and then right towards dusk you look up there, and one by one they've all worked their way up to the trees. They're looking at you, see little silhouettes. It was quite something. It was one of those rare moments, great outdoors. And just as much fun, the icing on the cake was we're sitting there in our chairs at the edge of the stream. Normally we'd watch the trout rise. Watching that, and as the turkeys are doing their thing, and it's a critical moment with them, I hear this sort of a clucking behind me, and it's these mountain quail that were also occupying here. And they were like right behind us. You could hear them right there. Didn't dare move. We were in their watering hole. So this is pretty typical each day. We'd walk the roads, we'd jump in the car. Gary would oftentimes be standing on the sideboard, hand on the roof rack, net in the other hand as I go down the road, and see something and go running. So that was the quickest way to get them. But it was, it ended up being much better than either one of us had really thought. I thought, well, we'll find maybe Yuma, maybe an Oregonius or two. We always have our fingers crossed for viceroys. And we worked our way down, I forget how many miles it is, maybe 10 or 12 miles to the north downstream from the town of Naha, ending at Cow Creek here, which is where the road kind of gets a little nastier, and it's just a good place to stop. But lush little bowl here, had a number of species in it. There was butterflies periodically all the way down the road, especially where it was near the river. There was even a hammock for at the privileged campsite at the end, so a person could relax after being out in the hot sun. Well, this is a flashback to the Turkey Hillside. That was pretty amazing. I was joking. It's like, I thought that like sheep and deer and cows made all those trails back and forth on the hillside. But no, it's the turkeys. So the surprises in the lower river. Indra swallowtail was not only there, but it was as common as I've ever seen it. Granted, I've only been to places like the Deschutes River, a little bit of John Day, a couple other little canyons, you know, in the vicinity or just east of the Dalles. But, you know, this is obviously Oregon swallowtail country, lots of host plant all the way down. Didn't see any caterpillars, didn't look too hard, but the adults were numerous enough to really make it special. And then pygmy blues, which periodically show up in modest numbers, were also there at Cow Creek, which I thought was really quite a good find as you know, sort of annual immigrants from the south. And who, you know, how the heck those little guys with those little tiny wings can move so far north and let's just jump up in the wind and go. But here they were, both fresh and worn individuals to bridge there. So I just thought that was quite something. And then the Viceroy.
How far south do those characters originate, the pygmy blues?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I think based on the severity of the winters, what, David, somewhere in northern Nevada? I don't know if they're resident in Oregon.
They putting tags on those?
Huh,
Maybe a little radio collar. So anyway, that was really quite a find, because that's maybe not a range extension. You guys get it occasionally up in Washington. John was telling me that picked them up was pretty far north. But still, they're just a pretty uncommon thing to see. And we did get into the Viceroys. There was a fair bit of the willow host plant along the river, and pretty much anywhere there was willows, there were Viceroys, and they were all fresh and beautiful, likely second generation butterflies. So that was just really exciting to see, you know, coming from Western Oregon, coming way over here and seeing these things in their element and seeing them when you hope to is just always exciting.
so Gary, if some of the folks here wanted to see this area, to go up to Imnaha and just follow the Imnaha River toward the snake?
It's not, okay, so yeah, so it's not too bad of a distance. Go to the Naha, which is basically kind of east and down the hill. And at the little town of Naha, you can cross the bridge, there's the post office and the store, and make a left and just go down, I forget how many miles it is to Fence Creek, which I believe is paved, and then it becomes gravel. Not a good road, not a terrible road. So if you have some clearance and decent tires, you should be okay, but definitely carry a spare. And go slow and easy because there are some sharp rocks in there. But that's, you know, I'm sure it's still good, still happening. And then if you want to go up to the higher elevation and see what's going on there at Grizzly Ridge, that should still be happening. So it's not too bad. It's a couple of good alternate area destinations. And then of course there's Mount Howard, which everyone is now familiar with. We spent a couple of days up there. The first day was 2 days ago when we got out of the Naha and took our 4 moth traps and our 4 batteries and our packs and our nets and made our way up the trams. The guys were extremely accommodating. They just threw all our gear in one gondola and took us in the next. And you know, they pull it out for you, and it was quite pleasant. One of the handlers at the bottom was curious, and we found out that he's a closet arachnologist studying spiders. Has an interest, but I don't think he's had a lot of other people to discuss spiders with in the area. So I thought I'd try to maybe hook him up with somebody at OSU, or you know, get him at least rolling in that direction, and supported it in his interest. So I think you have to encourage that anytime you come across it. Another neat little event was at the Naha store when we were headed out. I forgot how the conversation started, but the gal behind the counter said that her son she just bought her son a butterfly net, and he'd really taken to catching butterflies. And I'm all, oh, golden opportunity. So my intention, and I hope I will follow up, is to, I gave her my email, so if she contacts me, I will, is send him some, you know, pins and spreading board and a butterfly book and maybe a backup net, you know, good one, and see if if he takes to it. You gotta encourage this science when it's kind of a natural thing. So that was a lot of fun. So we made it to the top, put the traps out later in the day, and for 2 days, the first day Gary and I roamed around the trails, mostly in the primary loops. Then the second day, we ran into David James' family and went towards Aneroid Mountain along the spine there and looked at little bowls and enjoyed that exercise. But a beautiful place, and you have to appreciate every dollar spent on that tramway going up, because there's no way you're going to walk up that. So there's just a few shots here of, well, of course, if it's my camera, it's Gary, and the area, which you're pretty familiar with. It does vary quite a bit from the, I guess it'd be the north side of us. It's shaded and more forested, where you'll get sulfurs and some of the other forest-associated species, versus the sort of real dry, scree, rocky habitat, which holds others. And then, of course, some of these dry meadows, or perhaps seasonally wet meadows when the snow's melting. And our little friends that are up there, a couple different kinds of squirrels. Don't feed them. Should they get fed every day?
No.
It just kind of shows, if you guys went on this trail, you'll probably recall that. That's when you pop off the side of Mount Howard, and you're coming back to Mount Howard and kind of looking to the east. That was nice habitat, where I would have expected to see those half moon, the semi-lunars. Yeah. I never did. I saw one in flight.
We got one in the trip, didn't we?
You did, yeah. So, I think we covered the Mount Howard species pretty well between last night and what I heard you guys encounter tonight. And it sounds like even in, what can generally be considered a poor year, it's definitely holding up to more or less. Stuff is there, it's just not abundant. So, and that's a good thing. This is, what happens over time. There's good years and bad years, and even in a bad year, there's enough holding on so that given a couple of good years, they come back and they're the butterfly-filled meadows that we know and love. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments from anyone who's awake. See if you're nodding off. Yes.
Where are you going from here?
Well, it's a little bit open. We've got to check out tomorrow morning with all our gear and take care of some moths. But it's basically, I was hoping to catch up with anyone doing a little butterflying nearby. But we're kind of open for a day. I don't know if we know exactly what we're doing, say Monday, and then we'll head back Tuesday. So it's just kind of, we got to talk about it, but we're around for now. Yes?
This is clear off track, but today somebody said, is there any bristlecone pine up there? There's lots of the white bark, but I just wonder if you or anybody else in the room knows, is there bristlecone on?
I'm guessing that if there was, it would be announced somewhere.
Yeah.
Know it.
I didn't see it, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, well, please feel free at any time to contact me. Once again, thank you for having me. It's been a great time, and we're a great bunch. And this size of a crowd is very impressive. So you should know that you have something fairly unusual to have this many people willing to come together at some distance. Thank you.